You know, I've seen better coaching from Serena Williams' instructor at the U.S. Open in the stands. Insert your own Pittsburgh Panthers joke right here.
I don't know where to go with that, but no one's going to accuse Penn State of being a thief and stealing this game. 2-0, and Kent State should be 3-0, and non-conference is winding down.
Yeah, this is the last non-conference game of the regular season. Let's see how it plays out. The Blue-White Tailgate is next. Well, it's not the first time Penn State's ever scored 40-plus unanswered points in Pittsburgh. This time 44 unanswered, and Jay, in the end, 51-6.
Well, you know, you're never as good as you think you are when you lose. You're never as bad as you think, or excuse me, never as good as you think you are when you win. You're never as bad as you think you are when you lose, and it's probably true for both teams here. But Penn State really made some great adjustments in the second half and really looked like a different football team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And for Pitt's sake, I mean, wow, it was really a mess for those guys. And it all started with the coin toss, guys. That he couldn't even get the coin toss correct. Their coach gets a penalty. I mean, it really all came unraveled for him.
In fact, Ty, why don't you take us through this night, because this night had some remarkable twists and turns.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Penn State's run defense was vulnerable in the first half. They made some nice defensive game plan adjustments for the second half, and a boatload of Pitt mistakes allows the Nittany Lions to rout their in-state rivals.
Guys had a little bit more pep in their step, kind of, coming into this week, and I think that was, probably the biggest difference. Is early on in the week, our energy was high and we were ready to go.
We just knew that we had to stop the run to win the game, so changing our mentality and being able to get those stops and get the ball to our offense, who we know can score points, that was big.
Much like 2016, the offense is scoring those points in bunches after halftime. 5 touchdowns for the Nittany Lions in the third and fourth quarters against the Panthers. The coach sees even more potential from the group.
I think we can still be more explosive with the weather conditions. I thought overall we did some good things, especially we were able to establish the run in the second half.
Pittsburgh native Miles Sanders spearheads the rushing attack. The junior racks up 133 yards on only 16 carries. He knows his success depends on the big guys up front.
I tell them every time, after every drive, just they're playing a hell of a game, so they just got to keep pushing, and we go as they go. So it starts up front. They played a real physical game, and that was our mentality, just to beat them up front and be way more physical than them.
Result, are you surprised at all the score?
Pitt's a tough team. They play really well, and they played us really well in the first half, and they kept playing us really well in the second half too. But we made our adjustments, and it just kind of went that way, and it happened.
You can almost see that sheepish grin from Steven Gonzalez, right? I mean, it was one of those things that, look, these things happen, and it really got away from Pitt. And look, Coach Narduzzi's got a 7-year extension, I think it was, and so he's got some questions to answer over on the western side of the state.
To me, this is not a Pitt thing. To me, this is Penn State's playing for bigger stakes than being the Pennsylvania champion. This was a means to an end. All right, so did they get better from game 1 to game 2? Yes. That, to me, that's what the bottom line is here. It doesn't really matter who the opponent is, which now brings us to the PSECU desk and the update desk. And Josh, what do we have?
Welcome back to the update desk, sponsored by PSECU. This week, Penn State left Pittsburgh with a big win in week 2, but that wasn't all for the Nittany Lions. KJ Hamler was named to the Paul Hornung Award Weekly Honor Roll after a monster performance against Pitt. He racked up 145 all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns, becoming the first Penn State receiver with a rushing and receiving score in the same game since 2008. His lone rush attempt of the night went into the end zone for a 32-yard touchdown, as Hamler evaded the Pittsburgh defense with his speed and agility. He also added 3 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown, and 73 kick return yards in 3 attempts, showing off his explosiveness in the open field. The Paul Hornung Award is given to the most versatile player in college football, and that is something KJ Hamler is certainly making a case for. Last year's Hornung Award winner, Saquon Barkley, impressed in his NFL debut against the Jacksonville Jaguars. While the Giants may have lost, Barkley impressed with 18 carries for 106 yards and a score, as well as 2 receptions for 22 yards. His first career NFL touchdown was something that Penn State fans are all too familiar with, a big run and breaking a lot of tackles on the way. Barkley broke 5 Jaguar tackles en route to a 68-yard score, but unfortunately the Giants could not come up with a win. Barkley certainly impressed in his debut, and he's shown the ability to fit into the Giants' offense and the promise that made him a number 2 overall pick. Guys, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Josh. And now it's going to be Kent State at Beaver Stadium, and let's take a look at the series between the two. I know it's Jay's been pouring through the storied history between the two. But
6, a 10, and a 13. That's pretty good.
The 65 battle was huge. Was huge.
I wasn't alive. I don't know about you guys. I wasn't alive in 65.
But then James Franklin, by the way, looks at the quarterback who started his career at Auburn and sees a problem.
This is going to be a tempo offense, probably the fastest tempo team that we've seen since we've been here. Very much like Syracuse has been, very much like Baylor used to be. This will be as fast of a tempo team that we have played. They like to run the counter. They like to run the zone read. They like to run the split zone and the power play. They love the quick game and the RPO stuff. And then everything runs through the quarterback.
Started his career at Auburn, then went to a junior college, now is at Kent State. He was in the Under Armour All-Star game a couple of years ago before he went to Auburn, so yeah, he's a problem. Now, we're going to change up. We're going to go to defense next and talk about the Nittany Lions D as we continue after this. Great. Last week we were talking to management, and they said, if Penn State were to beat Pitt, by say 45 points, right, they'd get us new chairs from Aaron's.
And
look at this. I mean, really, I can't say enough great things. Tale of two halves. Let's take a look at the numbers. Tale of two halves, and this is what you documented, Todd. I mean, as to how it played out.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those numbers, the rushing yards, 31 in the second half, and passing yards, and look, the weather conditions really, it was.
The passing yards did spike from 17 to 38. I think that's important to know.
Well, and bringing that up, I bring up the weather conditions with that because you want to cut them some slack as far as the passing conditions and that type of stuff. Trace McSorley didn't have many issues with the ball. He did a good job with it. Pitt really kind of made themselves one-dimensional a little bit with some of the play calling. Pickett gave them some issues running the ball and that type of stuff, but they made all their adjustments and the rushing lanes. They just got much more disciplined, right, with the way that they were playing their D.
No question. And we're going to talk about some of the film on one of the adjustments they made with that inside power play. But they did a much better job playing the run. And obviously when teams backed up, Pitt became one-dimensional, and Penn State really took advantage of that defense.
And it goes back to one of the keys that I outlined last week. Penn State played with the lead. They were never behind.
Yep.
I mean, never behind. And that kid has never been in a game where he's been behind. Our Player of the Week brought to you by our good friends at Blaze Alexander. You go to the defensive front, his first game of the season, and we talked about the domino effect of Kevin Givens.
No question. I thought he really, if you didn't know who he was and you watched the game, you would say he jumped out at you. He made some great plays, ran down the one flare pass or wide out screen. I mean, that's not easy to do from his position. He really played with great effort.
There's another part of it, too. There's a domino here. Penn State now has its effective 4 defensive end package on second and obvious or third and obvious. And, Todd, that makes a big difference because he has the size to play that.
Well, no doubt. And when you get Kevin Givens into the rotation, I mean, everybody counts, right? It reduces the amount of snaps that everybody has to play. They're going to be a little bit more fresh when they do that. And you were talking about chasing down the pass. He wasn't just coming straight up. I mean, he was reading the play, and he would slant into the backfield and force him to go wider. I mean, he was really, it seemed like he had not just a good handle on what was going on, with their line, but just offensively. He was reading what was happening out there.
Well, when you're attempting to play for big stakes, as I outlined the first one, I talk about game 1 to game 2 improvement. I mean, it didn't matter if it was Pitt to me. It was who's ever next because they've got bigger games coming up. So did Micah Parsons get better?
No, there's no question that Micah Parsons got better. And I think one of the characteristics, it's one of those things about players in any sport, you just kind of, hey, he's kind of a gamer or this or that. He's just around the football a lot. He just gets himself near the football, whether he starts off with a misstep one way or the other. He has the quickness to recover, and by the end of that play, number 11 is near the football, wherever it's going to be.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about getting off of blocks. I mean, Jack Ham was a master of that during his career, and he talks about that in our broadcasts all the time. Middle linebacker Jan Johnson, who leads this team in tackles, discussed getting off of blocks and the importance.
And just work at it. I think that, sometimes it may look like you're struggling to get off blocks, but, you got to be in a certain gap. And so they're pulling, and, you want to go make the play, but you also, if you go to make that play, then the running back's going to be able to cut back and get into their holes. So it's also a combination of, you look at it, but we're trying to get into a certain gap that we need to be in and stuff like that. But as, overall, we need to just work on engaging with somebody, but also being able to just rip off and make a play.
And that front seven can make a difference in secondary coverage. Jay, what did you think of Penn State's secondary coverage in a Game 1 to Game 2 improvement?
Well, I thought they weren't tested as much. I mean, quite frankly, I think so. It's hard to gauge that. Obviously, made a great big interception at a key point in the game at the 1 yard line was huge. Because Pitt goes in there and scores. We're talking about a different game, most likely. Penn State still wins, but it's going to be a better game. But I think they challenged Pitt's receivers. They got after them. And I thought also in terms of the pass game, linebackers got a lot more depth in the drops in week 1, and that was a big difference.
Yeah, it was definitely harder to evaluate the passing defense this particular week. Obviously showed some growth, but, they did a nice job. And, Pickett, I mentioned, tucked it under and ran a couple times to make some guys miss. But in the second half, when he needed to throw the ball a little bit more downfield, they got a coverage sack or two because he couldn't find an open receiver.
All right, so now let's check out the tail of the tape between Penn State and Kent State. You can see what Kent State's done in their loss at Illinois, where they lost 31-24. Then they beat Howard. But the key is, at least they balance this offense, and it starts with the quarterback.
Well, when you have the ability to do two things, it creates more problems. And that running quarterback for any defensive coordinator. I mean, you talk to guys in the NFL that, as the running quarterbacks have come into that league, they're all wailing and moaning because now they got to deal with it. So that presents a problem in Penn State, no question.
Yeah, Woody Barrett's 230 pounds at quarterback and can really move. James Franklin says there are certain ways you need to play this.
It's frustrating because you feel good. You stop the run, which was what every defensive coordinator in America wants to do, and make people one-dimensional. And then you get great coverage, but as you're getting great coverage, the defense is turning their back to cover their guy or lose sight on the quarterback, and now he steps up in the pocket because you weren't as disciplined that you should have been in your rush lanes.
And that makes a big difference. I mean, you have to be disciplined, Jay, the entire time in the rush lanes when you have somebody with that kind of unpredictability.
Well, the other thing, too, is it affects your coverage schemes. You don't want to be as much man-to-man because when you get to man, you turn around, you're chasing your guy, all of a sudden the quarterback's loose and nobody's even looking at him. So that affects some of the things you do scheme-wise.
You have a frustration factor involved with that. It also taxes your energy trying to chase that guy down. Those defensive linemen, and they get weary quick trying to chase those guys down.
Plus, the tempo part's going to be interesting because, again, if they don't change personnel, you can't change personnel, or else it becomes a real fight to change personnel. I think sometimes the best scenario is if the hash is on your side. Now you can run a few guys on and off the field. All right, coming up, we'll take a look at the Nittany Lion offense and grade them out as to how well they did in Game 2 after this. All right, let's get to the Penn State offense. There are moments of ups and downs in the first half, and there were no downs in the second half. None.
Well, I think the big thing was the third downs are the one thing. We were talking about that in the film room a little bit. Got to do a better job on third downs. But no question, second half, a lot of big plays second half. And obviously some untimely penalties in the first half on the big run by Miles Sanders.
Yeah, Miles Sanders could have had about 100 yards more, combined offense with a couple of those penalties. But what I'd like to see is the offensive line and what they were able to do. We talked a lot about the improvement in the defense. Offensive line, asserted themselves, and they dominated in the second half.
All right, so let's get to our drive of the game. The drive of the game was right near the end of the first half. It starts out with a fumble on the snap, which was a problem all night for Pitt. Micah Parsons was there. Jarvis Miller recovers. And Penn State is in business at the 35. So let's go screen pass to Miles Sanders. Look at the blocking in front by the wideouts there. Johnson and Hamler to get the job done. I mean, that's where Penn State really showed a marked improvement with their wideouts. And then there's KJ, 14 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Jay, that was an emphasis forever here with blocking of your wide receivers, what they can do, not just on a pass play like that, but in the running game.
Exactly. We're going to talk about in the film room. Those are two of the clips we're going to talk about is how they block downfield. And when you're in the spread offense, you've got to block downfield. I think the other thing that was really good about the way they saw getting that 8-point lead before half took the air out of that stadium and out of Pitt. No question about it.
Well, and that's why it's the drive of the game. It's only 3 plays, but it was really somewhat of a backbreaker from a momentum standpoint. You know, Narduzzi didn't kick the field goal to take the lead. They missed that, or the 4th and 3 obviously changed things, and then offensively that was the momentum switch.
Time now for our Blaze Alexander Offensive Player of the Week, and that will go to number 1, KJ Hamler, as he stepped up again with a rushing touchdown and also with a passing touchdown. Here's a page right out of the Pitt playbook, that jet sweep. They love to run the jet sweep, so Penn State said, yeah, we'll do it.
Well, you know, the thing about that play was the kid from Pitt, the safety, came up and just didn't realize how fast he was.
Yeah, at all.
Just outran the angle.
Yeah, he just breezed past him. And, well, we've seen some hurdles before in the past, haven't we, guys? Vicious face mask at the end of it. But, yeah, he looks good out there.
If you're going to face mask, go all in.
Oh,
There's
wow.
the touchdown catch there. I mean, you think about there's a face mask on that play. There's a face mask on McSorley. Then there was another personal foul where McSorley got hit. And there was a face mask on the Oyuwari interception. I mean, it's amazing. And only one of them got called.
Well, you should take the face mask off. That's the way I see it. Then there's no more face mask.
Oh, where have I heard that? Where have I heard that in the Paterno household before? In the Paterno household, around the table.
Troy Aikman has said that about the concussion.
We should go back to black and white film, too. And, so that's fine. But, you know, we were talking about Hamler, and you mentioned the safety didn't realize how fast he was. I mean, people are still getting a book on him. The touchdown catch that he made, one of Pitt's secondary guys might still be spinning around in circles. He completely turned the wrong way. Hamler snuck right past him, and he was standing all alone in the end zone. So this guy's got some moves that the defensive backs have not seen, and you just can continue to expect that all season long.
And what's interesting, Todd, is we've been talking about the kids. It's supposed to be Juwan Johnson and DeAndre Tompkins' time, and through the first couple of games, they've had some struggles.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, how much of it is weather conditions with a couple of drops? You know, Trace laid one out for DeAndre Tompkins, looked like it could have been a touchdown, and immediately the play after Juwan Johnson drops a pass. We've seen that in game 1 and 2 from Juwan Johnson, and you didn't see it all last year, really. So it might be something mentally. He's just got to keep working out and catch about 1,000 balls in practice, right? It's the only way you can do it is go do it.
And James Franklin has complete confidence in both of those guys.
I think both Juwan and DeAndre have higher standards and expectations of how they want to play. I have the utmost confidence in those guys, and I think they're both going to have huge years for us. But, yeah, I think there's a few plays that they'd like to have back. There's no doubt about it.
All right, so what about the quarterback play? What about Trace McSorley? What do you think?
Well, if you look at his stats, you're going to say he didn't have a great day, but he put 4 or 5 balls right where they had to be in really bad weather. And I think that's what people got to focus on. And, you know, when I graded quarterbacks, I would say, you know, did you put the ball where it is? Yeah, then you did what you're supposed to do there. And that's, you know, I think that's how he's got to look at it. I don't think he'll ever lack confidence.
And then there's the offensive line that you referenced. I mean, you want to see them take over a game, and they started to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they were very pleased with themselves about that part of it, right? I mean, that's really such a confidence thing for an offensive line. And when you know you look across the line of scrimmage and you're going to win your one-on-one battle, you're going to win it as a line, and you kind of feel like you can really assert your dominance. You can feel that from the other guys as well, and the running back too. I mean, I think Miles Sanders really made it a thing to go north-south in this game. He really just hit the hole hard on the majority of his carries, and offensive linemen love to block for guys like that because they don't need to hold it that long.
The only time he got thrown for loss when he kind of swung out too far.
Right.
Tail of the tape, Penn State, Kent State, the offense versus the Kent State defense. There you see the numbers right there leading in, and Penn State's balance of 208, 204 for 412 right there. Brandon Polk, well, you know what? He's a veteran wide receiver, and you know what? He hasn't had the drops. He's been playing really well. Says Hines is going to be a big matchup for him on Saturday.
Number 8, their cornerback, is really physical up front, so, you know, and they don't really switch sides, so I'll be going up against him as well as the other cornerback, but yeah, so that's about the other person.
And they've been susceptible, Kent State has to big plays. I mean, that's something, too, that has to be factored in here. I mean,
well, if you're Penn State, you get a couple of big plays early. That changes the whole tempo of the game and really the confidence on Kent State's side. So
Well,
that's gonna be big.
and you heard Coach Franklin. He feels like they can be even more explosive if they're susceptible to big plays. Get in your seats early. You might see some big plays.
Well, over the last few years, James Franklin's recruited really well. But one of the better recruits he has been able to pick up in recent years was Blake Gilligan. We'll talk about special teams and the Nittany Lions and the performance of Blake Gilligan and what he was able to do to tilt the field as we continue after this. All right, let's talk about some shop talk presented by Ace Hardware of State College. And our shop talk this week is quite simple. It's on special teams. We go back to the theme that I established in the first segment, game 1 to game 2 improvement. Jay, how much better?
Tremendously. And I think, you look at the first game, there was a couple of missed tackles. It wasn't necessarily scheme-wise, but there were some big plays. But I think Blake Gilligan, you talked about a bunch. And, we were in our meeting before the show, and I said I would have voted him Offensive Player of the Week because he set Penn State's defense up to shut them down, to get short field for the offense. But the kick returns, all those things were.
And you mentioned tackling, and Steve, you've always talked about this from game 1 to game 2. Tackling is nobody tackles well, right? Usually in game 1, or it's tough to do that, especially in special teams.
Yeah.
And you're not going full speed at your teammates and camp and hitting them in special teams. And when you got the fastest, most athletic guy coming to you from the other side, that's not always easy to bring them down.
And we're in an era right now in football across the board, whether it's the NFL, high school, or college, is that your tackling takes place in the games, and usually it takes a couple of games to get into that. They did that. Well, Josh, give us a rundown. Josh Sperber takes a closer look at why Penn State special teams were so good on Saturday night.
Thanks, guys. There's definitely a lot to be happy about right now if you like Penn State football. In a dominant win against Pitt, the running game was excellent. The defense was lights out. But the real hero of Penn State's 51-6 victory was special teams. Led by punter Blake Gilligan, the Nittany Lions pinned the Panthers back every chance they could get, as 4 out of Gilligan's 5 punts were downed inside the Pitt 20-yard line, 2 inside the 10. Penn State had an average field position of 19 yards ahead of the Panthers, who averaged a start at their own 25-yard line. This helped the Penn State defense significantly, who rode that confidence to an average of 3.1 Pittsburgh yards per pass play and forced 3 turnovers on the night. In rainy conditions, Gilligan was not fazed, as he had 11 more yards than Pittsburgh's punter on 1 fewer attempt, and received a lot of praise from some of the Penn State players.
You don't have your whole playbook within the 5-yard line. You only get a certain number of plays, certain number of calls. So that definitely helped us.
Coach always say the game always starts off with special teams, whether it's kickoff or kick return. So seeing them being as dominant as they were in that, I feel like that gave us some extra energy on the sideline when that was happening, especially when DeAndre returned the punt for the touchdown and Blake's pinning them deep. As a team, you see that, you're just wow, it's finally all starting to come together.
There's certainly a lot of confidence in Blake Gilligan right now, and that is definitely well placed. Hopefully he'll continue to help the Nittany Lions punting the ball this week against Kent State. Guys, back to you.
Well, Josh, he is probably one of the top 5 punters in the country, I think, going into the season. He did nothing to hurt that. And Jay, it just part of coaching football is a chess game. When you've got a guy like that doing that, it makes the chess game different.
Especially on a night like that when you have a team that is going to have trouble getting out of their own end. And that really allows you, it's 4th and 4 and you're at midfield. Do we go? Do we try and change? You punt them in there and you play good defense, and they did it. It really changed the game.
And it wasn't just midfield, the 31-yard line. Yeah. I'm not so sure I can remember the last time somebody punted from the 31-yard line, but he puts a ball in there that basically bounces a couple times, and it's almost like the ball was talking to Kyle Vasey. Kyle, turn around.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Yeah.
Just turn around, touch the ball, because they're still getting set up. I mean, it was amazing how well he did.
The field, too, gives you that nice landing spot, like a wet green, Not that I would ever know, because I've never lobbed anything on the green successfully in my life, but that was nice. That helps.
So I said to Jack Hamler, the broadcast, at one point, says, "Man, it looks like you're wedge on 9." Look at that right there. Phil Galliano, look, he's in charge. He coordinates all this. You want to talk about a week 1 to week 2 improvement. He puts a lot into it, and he has to get some credit for the fact that they stepped up and played better.
Yeah, and I can tell you, it's tough to get those things really good in practice. I mean, there is no you want to get a scout team offense and defense put together, it's one thing, but when you say we need a scout kickoff coverage team,
Right.
nobody really wants to be part of that, and it's tough to motivate those guys and get that look in practice, but looked like they made a great improvement.
Just like players, coaches feel the eyes in the room, right? When you're going over the film or you're going over stuff and, okay, special teams, what's the report this week? He knew they needed to address some things, and they did. That's what you want to see, is they addressed the concerns.
I think one of the more important elements that you have to have when you're a kick returner, I don't care whether it's kickoff or punt, you have to have a feel for it. Some guys just say, I'm going to take off and go. Well, that's not a feel for it. What kind of feel does DeAndre Tompkins have on punts?
Well, the one, over the things we've seen of him, he has a pretty good feel for it, but obviously the one, to give credit to the entire punt return team, they blocked just about everybody.
Perfect.
It was unbelievable. I might have gotten 15 yards. I wouldn't have scored, but I might have gotten 15 yards.
Pulled a hamstring and then done.
Yeah, I would have stumbled over my own feet. I wouldn't have caught it in the first place. But they did a great job, and he's doing a great job, and that's important. Those 15-yard punt returns really add up in the course of a game on field position.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. All right. We're going to venture into the film room. Jay's already referenced it a couple times during the course of the show. I'm just going to kick it back in this chair as they do it because this is really comfortable. Thank you, Aarons. We'll come back with the film room after this.
We have moved things into the film room. It's brought to you by Beer, Belly's Beverage, and Jay, it's one of those situations, 51-6. You can look at your team and go, slow down there. We still got plenty of things. That's right. We still got plenty of things on tape that we're going to review because there was plenty of mistakes to go over.
When you get a young team like this, you're going to, because they've listened to friends and family, and oh my God, you killed Pitt by 45 points. You guys are on the way, Ohio State in 2 weeks. And most coaches are going to go into a situation like this and they're going to say, look, let's talk about the things that we did that are not good. And let's not get too high on ourselves. And if you had lost a game like this, you would go in and you'd highlight the positive, try and build. So let's talk about a couple things that probably are being discussed, or I'm sure were probably being discussed. And let's take a look, first of all, at some things that I would highlight. Third down has not been good throwing the football. Now, that said, it's not to put it all on McSorley. There's been pressure. There has been drop passes. But when you look at for the year, they're 10 of 26 on third downs for the year, and then passing 6 of 16 for 64 yards, only 4 first down completions and a sack. So, those are things they've got to improve. Now, you look at the second half. One of the things that improved was field position. We talked about special teams already. You look at the field position first half, both teams even. In the second half, dramatically different. So Penn State was essentially playing half-court football the whole second half. So that's a positive. So you take some negative, take some positive. Now let's take a look first at the defense, a couple things to improve. We talked about linebacker play a little bit. Some of the things when you have young guys and you're playing a team with a little speed and you're not sure, the angles here. Take a look at both these linebackers here. They're going to run a jet sweep and they take a step to the right, they angle coming in, and before they know it, the guys around them. Take a look at the video here. You're going to see both these guys. Again, young linebackers, not a lot of experience, and they take an angle. And in high school, not to be critical of anyone but one guy, but when you're in high school, you're going to make that tackle. When you get to college, all of a sudden, that guy's got a little more speed, and you'll get used to it, and he'll adjust. And they got better as the game went on. Second thing we'll talk about is some of the getting off some of the blocks and some of the things with coordinating what you're doing up front. Here early in the game, Pitt was running this inside power scheme a bunch, pulling people around, kicking out and coming up. And what happened is these guys are getting up the field, and the next thing you know, now a linebacker's got to take on a guard in the hole and get off the block. And you see they had some trouble with that. Take a look at the video here. You see that guard pulling, and the backside guy comes up and takes him on, and now he's by him for a touchdown. And so they've got to do a better job of that. Again, now, the other thing we would talk about is that same power scheme, which, again, they're going to see from Ohio State, they're going to see from Wisconsin. Everybody wants to start talking about those games. Here in the first half, they had a guy outside, and he was playing outside and turned inside, and the support guy's there to make the tackle, but he's not turning it loose to him, and he opens this thing up. And take a look at how that works out from the back end here. You're going to see he comes out, and now that Pitt guy's will be able to put his shoulders north and south and get right up the field, and now he's in the secondary. Now, how did they adjust? Let's talk positive. How did they adjust? Now, in the second half, same blocking scheme, same concept, and now he's going to work inside, collision these guys so you don't get the linebackers, and they come off and make the play. So let's take a look at how they adjusted there. And again, this is a great job. He collisions the tight end coming down the wing. He comes back out and makes the play.
Offensively, this is a team shaping up like 2016, 10 touchdowns after the break. So they're making some nice adjustments, but coming out a little bit slow.
Right. And I think we're going to talk about third downs. We mentioned that early. And they've got to get a little bit more consistent on those third downs, and no question about it. So let's take a look at some of the things in third downs. One of the things that happened to McSorley on Saturday was Pitt was able to get some pressure. Now, here's a run-pass option. Okay, he's looking here. They're blocking the run, but they bring two guys off. This guy in protection doesn't take either one of them, and now McSorley on a 3rd and 10 is thrown over a lot of hands. And take a look at this play from the video. You can see right here, he's got a guy open, and he's throwing over pressure. And that makes it tough to make that an easy throw, tough to complete that. Now, the other thing that happened is downfield, there were some situations where there were not guys open. You're going to see from this end zone shot, as McSorley goes back to pass, Pitt's going to run a long, slow-developing stunt. As he looks downfield, you'll see from his angle, there's nobody to go to, so he ends up getting a covered sack. So let's take a look at that from the end zone. The Penn State wideouts, the first couple of games, have got to do a better job of getting open in some key spots. And again, there was nowhere for McSorley to go with the ball. And it's not to blame the offensive line because they can only block guys for so long. Another thing was wideout blocking. We talked about that a little bit. In this offense, very critical. Here's a situation where with Hamler being your most dynamic wideout and being the guy in the slot and not being very big, he's matched up with a linebacker, and take a look at how that works. Now, it can be done, but it's just going to take a little more effort and a little bit more better job on his part. And there you have a situation where you lose yards. Now, watch the adjustment Penn State makes in the second half now. Second half now, these two guys come out and he gets help taking on that outside guy. And you see the difference in this. These guys end up blocking these guys downfield, doing a great job. And that's what they're going to need as a spread team. So take a look at that from this video. Nice, quick, and much quicker play. They get out there. They've got that guy all the way downfield. The safety can't make the play on a really, really good back, and that was the last drive of the first half that really got the game going.
Well, football's a game of adjustments.
Yeah,
Penn
no
State
question.
seems to be making those adjustments, whether it's just personnel in general from week 1 to week 2, or even in-game adjustments, which as a coach, I know you love to see those
No
in-game
question about
adjustments, because it's a chess match out
Yep.
there. Yeah, very good for them. So next up is Kent State. We've broken down what they kind of need to do for them. We're going to talk about them a lot more as the Golden Flashes come to town. It should be interesting. They got to take care of business, and then things down the road, as you mentioned, those teams. We won't talk about anymore, but they're coming. They're coming soon.
Yeah, I did mention those teams
Yeah.
that shall not be named yet, but I think Kent State's going to be a good challenge for them, give them a chance to get into the conference schedule.
All right, sounds great, Jay. Thanks very much. We'll be right back on the Blue-White Tailgate.
All right, let's take a look at Kent State. They'll come into town with a 1-1 record and a brand new coach as Sean Lewis has taken over. Let's take a look at the Sean Lewis file here. After extensive research by our staff, they were able to come up with this. Look, he's a Wisconsin guy, comes over Syracuse, and he brings a fast tempo to the table. So, Jay, let's start with this before we get into personnel. What does it take for a scout team to attempt to duplicate this kind of offense in practice?
It takes 3 scout teams. Quite frankly, you need 3 huddles going, and they're running, because you're running off cards when you're running scout team stuff. So, a lot of teams will have 2 scout teams going rocket fast as they can. It's hard to duplicate that in practice, it really is.
So difficulty scouting this team compared to, say, a Georgia Tech or a Navy. I know they're different as far as how you do it, but does it reach almost that difficulty to try and prepare for them?
Well, the X's and O's are no different. It's just a matter of having your guys. They don't have time to see a team come out of the huddle and set up and say, okay, they're in this heavy set. I know that 20% of the time they run this play. In these up-tempo things, your linebackers have to think very quickly. And I think that's going to be a challenge for Penn State because, again, they've got a lot of young linebackers that at times can look like they're lost. And they're going to have to try and keep up with this thing. So to think we're going to hold them to 3 points, hopefully I'm right. Hopefully that happens, but it's going to be a challenge.
And MAC schools are always interesting this way because you came from Syracuse. What makes him unique? What makes him different? Why would kids want to go play for him, right? I mean, those are the questions that kids ask yourselves. And so he brings a high-tempo style. He's got a former Auburn quarterback there. You get a good trigger man, and then all of a sudden, now it becomes interesting to the skills players. You know what I mean? And that type of stuff. So maybe he builds something here. We'll see.
Rankin's a good running back. He's a good running back, good receiver, too. And Williams is not bad. Joel Shaw, it's coming off a 105-yard game against Howard. They've had drops, though, at the wide receiver part. Last year, this year. We're not going
to throw that stone.
Right. I'm just analyzing it. That's been a problem.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you got to realize is this is a team that's gone to a Big Ten road game already. They lost by 7 to Illinois. Now, obviously, Illinois is not as good as Penn State,
Right.
And we'll see that next week. But they're a team that's felt they've been on the road. They've been at a Big Ten school. They're going to feel like, hey, we can compete with the Big Ten, and we've got. It's going to be one of those games that you've got to play well early in the game, take away any doubt, get ahead,
Right.
and put the pressure on them.
It is kind of fascinating, isn't it? The next two opponents are the next two, they played each other already.
Right.
So you've already got each other on film that you can look at as they do that. And I mean, it's week 3. The App State game, people will look at, well, it could be App State, could be App State. Well, the App State game, everybody's completely healthy, just about, that coming out of camp. You've got months to work on it. App State has no one else to prepare for on their schedule, which, by the way, Zach Thomas was 14 in week number 2. So if you want to do a common opponent type of thing, the kid can sling the ball. And, it's hard to do that in skeleton drills, to go 14 for 14. So, I think Kent State a little bit more banged up. They've already faced Illinois. So we'll see what they can bring, but I don't think this preparation is quite the same as for App State.
Well, there's one way to handle a tempo offense: 3 and out.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, that's exactly right.
We used to always talk about, we got these guys, they're going to be in the no huddle stuff. We said, well, make them punt.
Yeah.
They're off, and
suddenly no time's off the clock, and suddenly you've got the ball. It'll be the second odd man front in 3 games. Now, not all odd man fronts are created equally, obviously, but the fact they've already played one, does that help them?
Absolutely, because those fronts, you have different blocking rules. You have different. Where do you identify the middle linebacker? And now the quarterback's got a little bit more challenge of, well, if this linebacker's out and this one's in the box, I'm going to make that I'm going to designate that guy to be the middle linebacker as opposed to that guy, and then people try and scheme with those blitzes. So it does create a little bit of different situation for you on that one. But obviously, we got a quarterback that's, Penn State's looking at a quarterback that's played a zillion games. I think he's been down this road before.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And for Trace, for his situation, I mean, what is he doing in the Heisman race? People are, he's not these big numbers, blah blah blah. 2 numbers that matter are the wins in the win column and interceptions. Just keep your keep your mistakes to a minimum. And if those numbers are in good shape, especially against a team like Kent State, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
And also last week, I mean, they kept the designated number of runs for him down to a minimum. The first one he had was the touchdown run. That was the first designated
which you could sense.
Run.
Did you know that one was coming in the booth? You could sense it, right?
I said in the broadcast, I said, he hasn't run it yet, let's see.
Yep.
And then the other one was the one he scooted down to the 5-yard line, was a designated run. So they've done a good job. And by the way, just so people know, he's actually 12 yards away from 1,000 rushing in his career. He'll only be the second quarterback to ever get to that mark at Penn State. Michael Robinson with over 1,600.
850 or something in 1 year.
Down
But
the
the thing about with Kent State is, again, don't make the mistakes. And if you look at the Heisman, we talk about McSorley. You're not going to win the Heisman against Kent State, Pitt, or App State. You're going to win it. Ohio State, you're going to win Michigan State, you're going to win Wisconsin, Michigan. He's going to have every opportunity to win that trophy.
Everything's ahead of you, no doubt about it.
He's probably the kind of guy that doesn't talk about it because he just wants to win games, and that's what makes him special.
Well, that's why I've talked about him this way. Confidence without arrogance. Okay? You can't do that. You can't play this game unless you have confidence. I mean, that's why I always laugh out hearing Alex Cora talk about Mookie Betts. He thinks he's going to go 0 for 4 every night, and then he goes out and goes 3 for 4. Like, he's got to have some confidence in there somewhere. I mean, that's the interesting part.
You had to get a Red Sox reference in there because now they've clinched the postseason.
Excuse me, they're in.
I know.
They clinched the Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Coming up, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and our picks. I get the bad this week. And I'm looking at a week ahead on the bad. We'll talk about that as we continue after this. All right, welcome back. All right, it doesn't really matter in the overall scheme. It's at least a gauge because the college football playoff poll is still weeks away. That's the only one that really matters. But here's your AP poll in the top 10. See Penn State just outside of it at 11 after 2 weeks of the season. Notre Dame will, jump to number 4 with like one more win, and we'll go from there. But positioning, I think we've established, there's stuff down the road that changes that.
And nobody knows how good anybody is yet. I mean, everybody's excited about Texas A&M because they almost beat Clemson. Do we really know how good Clemson is? I mean,
no.
we don't know that. We know Auburn and Washington played. That's obviously a pretty good gauge. But, we'll see. There's a lot of football yet to be played, obviously.
I love the position they're in. Everything's right in front of them there. So Ohio State, Wisconsin on the schedule, they got plenty to look forward to, and they can take care of business on the field and do it at home.
And now, the good. The bad. The ugly. All right, angelic one.
Throw it my way, Steve. Bring it on over for the good. Absolutely. Look, my good is just college football in general in September and just it being all back, right? You get to a point in your life, we all know what we're talking about. You can't really make Saturday and Sunday your day to sit there and watch football all the time. At least I can't. Give me Saturdays all the time. Colorado, Nebraska, Clemson, Texas A&M, good games. Ohio State, TCU, maybe that's a good one coming up. LSU, Auburn, which I have to pick here in just a second or two. I love it. And it's just great college football games, and it's back, and I'm really enjoying it.
All right, so I get the bad. My bad is Friday night football. Penn State's going to have to play a Friday night game next week. Well, that changes the entire week, especially for the team that's traveling. Well, they get Saturday off. They're going to get back at 4:30 in the morning on Saturday. I mean, really. I mean, I'm sorry. You can't keep talking about the student athlete and keep playing games in the middle of the week when there's supposed to be a class. Jay?
Well, one of my years I was at Virginia, we played Saturday and Thursday, and that was really interesting. But let me talk about the ugly, and I want to talk about the way routes are handled at the end of a game. Last week James Franklin got some criticism for trying to review a fumble when up 45 points, and I know the argument is that you want to compete, but this is something that's going on across the board. And we got to remember, these are young student athletes. This is an educational enterprise, and what lessons are we giving them as to how you behave when these types of things? And again, this is not to single any one person out. It's the college football playoff, the pressure of the polls. I got to win by 40. Instead of, if I put this number up and the stats and all that kind of stuff. You know what? When you got the game in hand, you got it in hand. Who cares?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the picks now. All right, the intrepid picks. I get to go first. I have USC and Texas. And the key is that between Tom Herman and Clay Helton and myself, not one of the three of us knows exactly how good their teams are. Nobody knows.
Which one's a little better, Steve?
So I'm going to go a little better USC, okay? We'll go a little better there. Boise State, Oklahoma State. Josh, what do you have?
Oklahoma State versus Boise State has all the makings of a shootout. These are two teams with strong passing offenses, and they like to throw the ball. I'm going to pick the Cowboys at home, though, because I think Justice Hill is the better back, and he complements Oklahoma State's offense very well. Todd, what do you got?
As I said before, I have LSU and Auburn. Good for Ed Orgeron, right? Off to a great start. They're heading to Auburn. I think if this one was in Death Valley, I'd choose LSU, but it's not. It's at Auburn. I'm going to go with the Tigers.
I got Ohio State and TCU. Let me tell you something. Dwayne Haskins, if he keeps up this pace, he'll win the Heisman. He's been in for 15 drives. He's played only 5 quarters in the first 2 games. Of the 15 drives he's been in, they've scored touchdowns 12 times. Unbelievable. Now, that said, TCU's in the top 10 in a number of defensive categories, so this is going to be a good thing, good test for both teams, but I think Ohio State pulls it out there.
Yeah, Gary Patterson, good coach. I mean, especially defensively. All right, our Aaron's keys to the game. Here we go. So let's get it rolling. Jay, your keys.
I think no turnovers early for Penn State. Don't put the ball on the ground. Don't let Kent State hang around. Get out ahead and put the pressure on them.
I'll just phrase it as keep it clean the whole game. Not just the turnovers, but the penalties as well. That don't shoot yourselves in the foot as you're going down the field. Keep it clean.
Yeah, and play with the lead. I mean, this is one. If you're playing with the lead, and you put them in a catch-up mode. That's what Appalachian State did a great job of. Appalachian State, after a quarter and a half, said, "Hey, look, their confidence grew." You can't let a team's confidence grow. You play with the lead, make sure they never think that way. All right, so, wow, this is comfy, isn't it?
It is.
Keys to the Game were brought to you by Aaron's. Nice deal. All sorts of stuff. We'll talk to you next week on Blue White Tailgate.